Welcome to another unit of this Excel course. This time I'm going to talk about sum and count functions and how I can use them in conjunctions with some kind of conditions. Well, let's work our way through this step by step. The first idea would be if I have like a row of data and I want to calculate the average, but I don't know that I can use the function average. Well, I need two aspects here. First off, I need the sum of all these scores, and for this I have the corresponding sum function. So here I go with sum, select the range I want to add up, and it gives me the sum of all the observations. Well, then for the average I would also need the number of observations, so this can be achieved with count. So he counts how many entries there are. Again, I can just select the whole range, close this, and I get the number. So I could get my average here by dividing the first one with the second, giving me 69.5. Well, so far so good. However, if I want to count, or if I get the idea not to count the scores, but to count the names, well, let's try this here. I would get this result, which looks strange because I still have 8 entries here. And the function reads in its description, could go back to this, as counts the number of cells in a range that contain, and now it comes numbers. That's the specific part here. Count only counts numbers. If you want to count anything else, we need to count A. Here it says counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So this will also count text. So here we should actually switch to count A. Then we actually get the same 8 observations we have here. An interesting side note on this, well, if you do or want to do the exact opposite, you also have here the possibility of going with count blank. So this will count all the cells which are empty, where there is no entry at all. So here we have actually a difference between counting numbers, counting anything. Well, for sums doesn't make sense because you can only sum up numbers, you cannot sum up text, so there is no sum A function. Okay, so this makes sense, but then again, well, we really did a lot of work just to get an average, and we could use the average function for this. But we can use the same approach, for example, if we introduce something like a passing score. So you need to have at least 50 points, or more than 50 points, to pass a test. And now we want to know what is the average score of those people who actually passed the test. So we want to have first the sum of all those guys who actually get more than 50 points. Well, I could select this all one after another by hand, would be a lot of tedious work, so we're going to do a different version. That's where here the sum if or sum ifs come into play. Sum if is like adds the cells specified by a given condition or criteria. So here first I select the whole range again as before, then I give the criteria, but I give the criteria in quotation marks. So here my criterion is larger than 50. So all the people who passed achieve a comprehensive score of 500. Then I need to count how many people actually did pass. So I use count here, but then again count if. Select the range, then I add my criterion, which is again larger than 50. Oops. Yeah, what I forgot was to actually close the quotation marks. So now he counts, he has 6 observations, yeah, excluding those 2, which achieve a score of larger than 50. Then I can just again divide the first one by the second one, telling me on average the score was 69.5, but of those who passed, the average score was 83.3 something. Well, that's already an interesting insight, so we can also differentiate between summation and counting under condition. And I just said condition, not conditions. Because at this point, we only use the version where I can add one single condition. If I want to add more conditions, I actually have to use a different version. So if I go with the sum again, I have some if and some ifs. Here I have a set of criteria. So if I take the same one again, I'm first asked for my criterion range 1, my criteria 1. So this will be summed up. Then I need to define which range the first criterion actually applies to. So here, if I want to analyze the numbers, I can select the same thing here as well. Then comes criterion 1, larger than 50. Then I get, if I continue, criterion range 2. Here I could, for example, go only those whose name starts with an I, or only who are called Hans, or stuff like this. Or again with the scores. And add an additional criterion like add only those where the score also is smaller than 90. Then I have two conditions. Score should be larger than 50 and smaller than 90. Then I only get this result. So I excluded this person and this person. And can do the same thing with count ifs. So I start again with the criterion range, with first criterion, larger than 50. Second criterion range, second criterion, smaller than 90. He gives me only 4 people. Yeah, he excluded those 2 due to the first criterion, and those 2 due to the second criterion. So for all the people between 50 and 90 points, I get an average score of 78.25. That's actually the difference between first of here the sums and the counts, sum if, count if, and sum ifs, count ifs. And well, you've seen here with the sum, I actually have first a sum range. That's something which I also have here with the sum if. I can define a sum range as well. But in this case, it's not actually mandatory. I don't need this necessarily because usually the criterion is what is summed up as well. But here as well, I could go with range. So evaluate the scores, sum up the scores. Criterion starts with A or is equal to Hans, and the range is, for example, then Hans. This were if I, for example, have salespeople, different people who are selling stuff, and some of them actually occur twice. And then we have like the volume they are selling. Let's assume those are the numbers. And I only want to sum up the results for Hans. Then I could go with sum if, range. That's actually what he has to sum up, the volume. The criterion is, it's like equal to Hans. So here I can just write, if I have something with equal to Hans, what he has to sum up. I just mixed this up. The first range is actually where he has to look for Hans. So the first range is this one. And then the second range, which he has to sum up. So the sum range is actually this one here. So in this case, he takes a look. Okay, contains Hans. Take the 10. Contains Bob. Okay, don't consider the 15. Contains Hans. Yes, okay, add the 5. So I'm at 15. Does this contain Hans? No, so don't add the 7. So I'm at a final result of 15. And well, as I said, I can do this with SUMIF and as well with the SUMIFs. With the count, it doesn't matter because I'm only counting here. I'm not, well, testing something here and counting something else. This wouldn't make real sense. So that's why for counting, I don't need a count range and a criterion range. With sum, could actually make sense to differentiate between them, as we've seen here with those salesperson. And well, that was all I wanted to add in this context on counting functions, on sum functions, and how to enter conditions into them. Well, as I said, that's all there is. So if you're looking for additional Excel input, feel free to visit the rest of the course or have a look at the corresponding playlist. I say goodbye and see you next time.